Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Baby Ballers. No, I am not dead. I am alive. It feels like it's been such a long time since I last recorded a Baby Ballers video. Life's just been super busy, but I'm well, I'm alive. And today we basically have our third member. He's done much more videos than me. But we have PJ here to talk about his exciting trip where he went to like five, six different matches of our Korean boys playing, and we'll run through, the cost of each ticket, his favorite stadium, most and least impressive player. You guys are gonna really enjoy this one. But before we begin, PJ, how you been?
I've been great, man. I just got back from Europe, like you've discussed here, and the Champions League has been absolutely bananas. I mean, me and you've been talking about that. Today's Barcelona Inter Milan second leg match
Woo!
was probably the best soccer match I've witnessed on TV in I don't know how long, maybe since the World Cup, like 2002. Like I can't really think of another match where I was just on the edge of my seat. I'm not a fan of either team, but it was that good.
It was perfect for the neutrals. Like I can't even imagine watching it as a Barca fan or an Inter fan. I mean, you're gonna experience it tomorrow with
Yes, I am.
PSG and Arsenal, I'm sure. But yeah, today's game was such an electric, like the epitome of what you want Champions League football to be. Let's move on to like talking about this crazy trip of yours. When you told me about it when you were planning it, I was like, there's no way you're gonna see that amount of games in such a short period of time. So for our viewers, can you kind of go through, how long you were on this trip for and like exactly what games you saw?
Okay, so it was over 6 days, and we fit in four matches, and somehow we scheduled this so well that we had Koreans playing in all four of these matches. Unfortunately, Son Heung-Min did pick up a knock that he's still going through right now. We don't know if he's going to play in that second leg of the Europa semifinal, but he was the only one not to play. But it just fit our schedule perfectly. Me and my two friends who are big footy guys, we've been talking about this for a while. It just somehow manifested. I don't know how it worked out. Permission from the wives and all that, and somehow it got done. It was crazy. There's a lot of things I do want to, talk about with our to our audience as far as like what you're gonna have to experience or what you got to be prepared for as far as traveling and stuff like that. Isn't it? It's not the easiest, to be honest, especially if you don't speak the language. Especially we had some more difficulty in Paris than we did in London. The English speaking is a lot more prominent in London, obviously, but in Paris they don't really care. So there's not a lot of English going on, or Korean for that matter. So there was a little bit of struggle there with that.
Yeah, so kind of go through the four matches. I guess the most important thing would be tell us what would the home stadium was because the prices change based on the home team. And then can you go through the cost of each ticket? Because like flights, accommodation, those will be different for each person. And it totally, depends on where you're flying from and, what kind of accommodation that you want, whether it's a hostel or a hotel or a B&B. But in terms of strictly game ticket cost, can you run through that for us?
Yeah, real quick. Yeah, first match was Stoke City at home. It's a bit of a train ride to like the countryside to get there. There's not much going on there. You see a lot of grass fields on the way on the train. I think it took us a pretty long time, close to almost 2 hours, I think, an hour and a half from London, which we were staying at, to Stoke. But the ticket prices were almost too cheap. I almost felt bad. It was £11 per
Oh my goodness.
ticket, which is crazy when you think about it, because we had great seats on top of that. So you almost feel guilty. It's like you're going to a local high school game or something. You're paying like a pity fee. But yeah, that one was £11. QPR, I think it's because they're closer to London and they have recent Premier League experience, but their tickets were a little more expensive, I believe, at £50. And then the last two there were obviously a little more expensive with Tottenham and PSG. PSG was, I think, the most expensive at around 120, €130 per ticket. And Spurs we got at 110, I believe. And this was all at retail. Obviously, if you wait too long to buy tickets, it's going to be troublesome. You might have to pay resale on those sites. Just remember, I guess, for the people listening here or watching, if you're buying tickets, especially at the bigger clubs, they do have like a filter option to filter out resale tickets and just buy the retail tickets. So that's a big key there because you don't want to be tricked into looking at everything and going, oh, that must be the regular retail price when it actually isn't. So that's just a tip for the listeners and the watchers there for that.
Yeah, and then for some clubs, I know Tottenham for sure, you have to actually pay a fee before you can even see which tickets are available.
Yeah,
Such a
it's
money grab.
tricky. And I thought only one of us had to do that, but it's one ticket per member. It's a real pain
Yes, I
to buy
remember.
tickets for this. I think this is especially challenging for EPL teams. I think most of the EPL teams have it set up that way. PSG wasn't that difficult. You just have to be a member, just sign up. It's free, and then you can just the tickets are free for all. So it's not like I bought 4 tickets or 3 tickets all at once under my login.
And then, okay, so you saw Pejino at Stoke,
Yes, I
you
did.
saw
Right here.
Ji Swansea, you saw Yang Min-hyuk QPR, obviously your boy Lee Kang-in at PSG. Couldn't see Sonny at Tottenham, but you
Yeah, that
still
was
caught the
unfortunate.
Tottenham Forest game. So, and I know that you saw a couple of the boys after the game for some
Correct.
photo
Yeah.
autographs and some photos. So, I guess the first question I have for you is who did you see, and then who provided the best fan service?
The championship level, you don't have the same kind of security or lack of availability with the players that you do at an EPL team or at PSG. That's just not going to happen. You're just not going to see them walk through the doors or the gates, be like, oh, they're going to sign for 100, 200 people. It's just not going to happen. But at both Stoke City and QPR, the fans wait right outside the team stores, and within probably about 30 minutes after the game, all the players come out. It doesn't seem like there's some players don't and some players do. It just seems like a very routine thing for these players to come out to take pictures and autograph. And obviously, Pejino and Yang Mi both did. Pejino really went above and beyond. He could have easily stayed behind the gates, just signed a couple things and went back to his vehicle. But he actually was the only guy from Stoke City who actually came out through the gates in the open. Or I mean, he's very vulnerable, and then he basically took pictures and signed for everybody there. It was cold. It was really, really cold. I was shivering. It was that cold. The wind had picked up. It was kind of rainy. It wasn't nice, but he was above and beyond, man. He took pictures. He talked to people. It was great. Yang Min-hyuk also was great too. But I think the difference there, and they're human. Yang Min-hyuk was coming off a 2-0 loss, and he got yanked, I think, like in the 50th minute. He didn't really play well, so he wasn't in the best of moods. Pejino didn't play that great either. His team doesn't possess the ball too much, so his touches were lacking, but they still won and picked up the dub, so he was in a better mood, more talkative, answering questions, and really going above and beyond. So I really appreciated both players there on the fan service front. But Pegino probably takes that as far as a crown.
And I think one of the benefits of seeing the game, like, in person, and that's why, a lot of the scouting is done not, through watching games over the TV or video analysis. That is definitely important too. But like, there's subtle things that you can see in
Oh yeah.
person that, that you wouldn't necessarily catch while you're watching, a match on TV. So I guess the next question for you is you saw all these guys play in person. So out of the four guys that you saw, who kind of was like, wow, like I did not expect him to be that electric or that fun to watch? Who impressed you the most? And then who was a player that you were like, okay, he definitely still needs a lot of more work and a lot more development, a lot more time for him to grow as a player.
The biggest surprise for me was Ji-sung at Swansea. I went into that match expecting Yang Min-hyuk to be electric. I was like, okay, and Ji-sung was kind of, maybe it's I don't rate him too high as a player, so I wasn't expecting much. But Ji-sung really, really impressed me in that match. His explosiveness, his confidence with the ball, and more than anything, this is crazy. I had no idea he was that good in the air, because I know that's a quality that a lot of Korean midfielders or attackers seem to lack. Especially, I mean, if we're not talking about like Kim Shin-wook or Cho Gi-sung, like that type of player, I'm talking about a midfielder or someone who can actually move. But he was really dominant in the air. He's very athletic. I thought he looked quicker and more explosive than Yang Min-hyuk did, and I was not expecting that at all. So he impressed quite quite a lot. As far as the best overall player, I think it's pretty much a given at this point. I don't think I'm being biased, but watching Lee Kang-in play, he played like I think 70 minutes or so um, in his match against Le Havre, and it
And he played
was
as a CDM that
he
match.
did. He did. So you didn't see him move up too much, but his ability to spray the ball, I think it was like you had a couple wow moments with just the accuracy of like the long passing. You don't, and I was not seeing that at the championship level. I think that's what you notice as far as the difference between championship level football and then like a League One or Premier League is that in championship league you do see a couple good players on each team, like, oh, that guy's pretty good. But then the rest, you're just like, and you don't see the ball connect, you don't see the crisp passing, you don't see the long balls, you don't see that quality. But as soon as we started watching PSG, Igangin was like, I think 7 for 7 on long ball passes. And it's like watching like a long Tom Brady like touchdown pass. You're like, there's
Mm.
no way it's gonna get there. But like he gets like Barcola in stride. He gets his, Due in stride. It's like I don't it's like mind blowing to watch it in person because you're like, there's no way. And you don't see like you can't fathom the distance that they're kicking the ball and the timing of it unless you're there. And
Mhm.
I really felt that. And I mean, he had a couple of dribbles too that oohed and awed the crowd, but his long passing to me is what really like just took it over the top. And as far as disappointing, yeah, I'm gonna have to go with Young Myuk like I was talking about earlier. I was expecting so much out of him. Maybe it was high expectations of me, but I did notice kind of a lack of physicality from his part. I know he's younger, so he has to develop that part of his game. But he didn't look quick at either. I don't know what kind of tactics they were playing. It was pretty bad. They were like throwing long balls up to Yang Min-hyuk and this like Temu Xerxes guy they have on their team who's like really small too. So they're playing long balls to them, and they weren't winning any of their aerials, and he didn't really get a lot of chances to do his thing. And even when he did, he struggled on the ball. So that was a tough watch for me because I had expectations of Yang Min-hyuk. We were watching, his K League highlights a couple years back, and we're like, oh, this guy, he's next, he's got it. But I think he is a couple years away. I do feel like Pejunho and Ji-sung are a little physically more ready to contribute as far as KNT stuff goes right now. I think Yang Min-hyuk needs a couple more years to develop physically. We talked about Lamine Yamal and stuff like that. He's only 17, 18 years old, and he's physically just ready already. But I feel like for Koreans, we kind of develop a little
Mhm.
later,
Mhm.
maybe like early 20s, mid 20s to physically finally mature. And that's why I think the likes of like Ji-sung and Pejunho contributing and being physically ready, and Yang Min-hyuk being what is he 18 right now? I think right, 17,
Yeah,
18.
19, I think.
19, sorry, yeah. I
Yeah.
think he does need a couple more years, maybe like 21, 22. We'll probably see a different Yang Min-hyuk. But as far as disappointing goes, unfortunately, QPR's team in general and Yang Min-hyuk, him specifically, were a big disappointment.
I guess my one second thought for each of the players that you mentioned before we move on to the next question is, starting with Ji-sung. Like, yeah, I think he's a guy that we really underrate. Like, we quickly forget that he received a very, very early call up from Paolo Bantu, which was huge because, Paolo Bantu player selections were pretty spot on. And I think he was like, he might be the youngest goal scorer of like in senior A matches or like one of the top three, and obviously he played for a very, very well coached Gwangju side. He's a pupil of Lee Jung-ho, and he's a guy that reminds me a lot of Sonny in some ways. He's a guy that will take a quick touch and just shoot it top corner. Very, very good with both his feet, and he's definitely way slower than Sonny, but he has kind of the more techers. He's able to beat a guy 1v1. I think he's definitely, going to be one of our left wing options in the future. Maybe him, Yang Hyun-jun, Yang Min-hyuk, those guys are all going to be competing for that left wing, right wing spots. So yeah, I think Swansea is a good spot for him. They're kind of a team where they are always going to be pretty good to hopefully make a push for promotion, but they're not going to be horrible where they're just playing awful football and there's no point of Ji-sung being there. In regards to Lee Kang-in, I am so happy that he is getting minutes in a more deeper role. I think it's his time at PSG, at least this year, has been a little bit disappointing because of his lack of his minutes. And I think that's, his lack of his minutes are kind of justified because of how well the other PSG players are doing, like Desiree Doué, Kvaratskhelia, Barcola. Dembele. It just goes on and on and on. The electric, attacking talents that PSG has. But if Igan gets a couple of minutes in the midfield, and Enrique is an exceptional coach as well, I think that just adds to the arsenal and the flexibility that he can bring to the national team. I hope, it depends, I guess, what happens in, the coming months in terms of, what PSG says to him in terms of how they vision he is going to fit in their squad. But I think, he can get a move, and I hope he gets a move where he develops as a midfielder, not as a right winger, because right winger, yes, he does have the 1v1 ability and he does have the finishing ability that we've seen for the Korean national team. But in a European setting, in the highest of quality of leagues, he doesn't have that pace or really that physicality to stand out as a right winger. He'll be a perfectly serviceable right winger and he'll have good games, but I think his real asset will be from the midfield. And I think that, for the Korean national team as well, that would be his strength. And then finally, in terms of Yang Min-hyuk, I totally agree with you. He looks small, he looks a little bit frail. But we have to remember, like, this is his second professional season. He really only had that one breakout season in the K League where he basically he almost won K League MVP as a newcomer. And then Tottenham, saw enough where they're like, yeah, 4 million is, a good lottery ticket to have. Maybe he could be the next Son, and that's an absolute, a good risk for us to take. I like where he's at in the championship. I hope that he gets another loan there next year, but maybe to a team that tries to play a little bit better football. Like you mentioned, like QPR is just terrible football.
It's really bad.
You'll mention the facilities later, terrible
Oh,
facilities as well. But if he is able to go to a championship level side, still experience the physicality of English football, but play in a more organized and progressive style of team, I think that's gonna be so good for him. Like the talent is there. Like the two goals that he scored for QPR, the finishing was like
mm.
to I feel bad comparing every single player to Sonny, but the finishing genuinely was Sonny-esque. I think he had one with his right, or maybe both with his left. But he's incredibly two-footed as well. But they were both bottom corner shots that had an extreme amount of power to them. So I think it's going to be great for him to keep experiencing English football if his ultimate goal is to find success with Tottenham. So those are my quick thoughts on the players. And then moving on, I guess, what is the stadium that you were like, wow, like I'm so glad I was able to experience a match there? And then what was one where you're like, okay, only go to this stadium if you are 1,000% passionate about supporting the boys. If you don't want to go there, I wouldn't blame you.
First, impressive wise, and this is coming from somebody who's been to a lot of sporting events, whether it be stateside or in Korea or anywhere else. But Spurs Stadium was so overwhelming, so impressive. Even from a distance, when you're walking up to it, you're like, man, that's big. And then you step inside and everything's, I mean, it's a new stadium, so everything's high tech. You got LED screens everywhere. The lighting is like almost cinematic. It feels like you're watching a movie when the guys are moving on the field. It's like it's a different look. You're not gonna see this anywhere else. I didn't see it at PSG. I didn't see it at the other stadiums. It was just visually so stunning, and I think I was so impressed with, especially how they kind of did the seating, especially when
Mm.
you're viewing it from the bottom and how it goes up. It
Mm.
just looks so high up there, and it's just visually, I'm assuming very intimidating for opponents to look at that and just go like, how many people are here? And then the facilities, the amenities, the food, the concession stands, everything was just so top notch there. The store, I went into the store there. It felt like I was going into Disneyland. That
Yeah,
team store is gigantic.
it is. Yeah.
I've never seen a team store like that in my life. They had like all these ushers organizing people in the lines. I think they had at least 50 cashiers there working. It was so efficient. You had metal detectors going in and everything. It was crazy. This is just the store, by the way. And the stadium itself was like just so beautiful. And I was really impressed with that stadium. Even coming from someone like, again, who lives in the States, who's been to a lot of stadiums, that was by
Mhm.
far the best stadium I've ever been to in my life. As far as most disappointing stadium, that has to go to QPR Stadium. Even like walking up to it and then going through the turnstiles and stuff like that, I felt like I was going to prison. That's kind of what it felt like. I was like, I'm going to a soccer match, right? Or am I getting arrested here and thrown in jail? That's kind of what it felt like. You go to your seats, everything's very like the viewing is very just congested. You got kind of like these support beams holding up the stadium that are blocking your view. It doesn't matter where you're sitting, that's going to block you. There's catwalks with like, and you're just like, it feels like if you're watching an IMAX TV or a screen with Tottenham, you're watching this like really just trapped screen of a TV of a football match, and you're just kind of like, it was not enjoyable. I went to the bathroom at halftime. They have this one shareable, just like long L-shaped sink that you got to take a whiz in. And I walked in there going, okay, you know what? I'm just gonna go wait until the game's over and go somewhere else. It was that bad. Unless you're really into QPR or you really like Yang Min-hyuk, that's probably the one stadium I'd stay away from. Even Stoke City was like 2 or 3 tiers above QPR Stadium as far as the experience and the stadium itself. That one is very wide open. You're able to see the game from anywhere. The ambiance was really nice as well. So Stoke City was definitely worth the ticket price, especially for £11. That's like I said, I felt like I was stealing at that point. And QPR was 50 a piece, and I kind of feel chipped off on that one, to be honest.
I mean, £11 and you got a photo and an autograph from him.
Yeah,
It's probably worth that
yeah,
itself.
it
Yeah.
was. It really, really was. And like I said, the atmosphere there was great too. Um, you felt the banter from the local fans. They're talking constantly about the players, good and bad. Both cheering sections that day were on point in Stoke City's, Sheffield Wednesdays. So it created just 90 minutes of pure, just great energy. I felt like as far as like match experience, that was probably my favorite as far as the crowd, the banter, and just the overall atmosphere. I think that's what Spurs was lacking a little bit. I know we talked about this a little bit before, but it felt a
Hmm.
little corporate in there.
Hmm.
It wasn't as loud. There were a lot of quiet fans. The cheering section was kind of scattered. And I don't think the Spurs have the most catchiest chants on top
Yeah.
of that, to be
Yeah.
honest. So it was hard to like sing along and kind of try to, help the boys there. While the stadium itself was super impressive, the atmosphere as far as like overall feel if I make NBA comparisons for our American viewers, I've been to a Knicks game in New York, and you could really feel the banter and the local fandom there, and it feels like you're a part of the game. You're watching it, and the ambiance is great. But I've also been to a Laker game, and that felt a lot
Hmm.
more like the Spurs, where it's more corporate, quiet. You don't have the rowdiness, you don't have the banter going on. So that's the one or the takeaway as far as the Spurs go that was a negative was probably that aspect of
And then the last thing I wanted to talk about, and it's even, as a Spurs fan, it's even embarrassing to bring this up, but, we've seen a growing amount of racism on Twitter, Instagram, various different types of social media towards Korean, in general, like Asian fans. And I'm wondering if you received or if you witnessed anyone kind of receiving odd looks, just kind of weird comments or just anything that you felt, that was kind of off when you were watching the Tottenham Stadium, or if these, these trolls, these people, these hate-filled people are mostly online, or at least when they're in person, they're too afraid to actually say these comments out loud.
It's crazy. I was expecting some of that, or at least to notice it, but I actually didn't experience any of that. I'm not sure if it's because me and my buddies speak English, so maybe people are more, considerate because they're like, oh, they speak our language. We probably shouldn't say anything. But the one thing I did notice at the Spurs Stadium is the sheer amount of Koreans. He wasn't even
Hmm.
playing, and I think a
Hmm.
lot of these people come just for Sonny. Don't do this like 4 match, round trip that we did. And there were so many. I think it's hard to kind of troll or kind of try to do that when you have so many of us there. I was really impressed with the turnout as far as how many of us showed up. Even just like in the team store, I just like it seemed like maybe every fifth person was Korean. I'm like, this is crazy. We didn't get a lot of like local banter like back and forth. I got a lot of that at Stoke City, like I was saying. That's why I enjoyed that so much. I was talking to a lot of the people next to me. We're like talking about the game and how it was going. We're talking about Bay. So it was really fun. They were really, really nice people. Even when I posted some pictures and I tweeted about Stoke City, I believe I got the most feedback back from Stoke City fans saying, "Oh, welcome back anytime. We loved you being here and all this." So it was a really great experience there. And overall, in Europe in general, I thought I would experience more of that. Maybe we got some more looks on the in the Paris side of things, I think,
Mm.
especially because we're not speaking French. I think speaking
Yeah, yeah,
English and then
yeah.
looking like this, I think probably gives you like a double target on your back. So you did get some looks, but whether they're saying anything bad or not, I can't because I don't know any French. But in London, it was a pretty good melting pot in London as far as the
That's good.
people
Yeah.
go. You have a lot of different people there, a lot of different races, a lot of different
Mhm.
cultures. Even like when you're walking around London, as far as like restaurants go, we were able to find pho in London that was pretty good. There's Korean restaurants, Chinese restaurants, sushi everywhere. So it
Mhm.
felt a
Mhm.
lot like New York in London.
Yeah.
So I think for anyone visiting, I think London is a great place to visit. I think anybody would have a good time there. And as far as football experience go, it was great. I didn't experience anything negative on my part. If I was, maybe I was oblivious. I was too focused on the match and I didn't see it. But like you said, I think a lot of these trolls are a little more brave behind the keyboard and behind their screens than they are in
Yeah.
person.
Well, PJ, I am very, very jealous of you. I'm sure a lot of our viewers are going to be extremely jealous of, your amazing adventures that you had in Paris and London and Stoke as well. If any of you guys have any questions about ticketing, trips to planning, football trips in general, PJ is available. He's very, very accessible on Twitter. You can find him there. For now, that's it for this video. I'm sure we'll be back. The next World Cup qualifiers for us is in June. We have a couple of big matches against Iraq, and who's our second opponent, PJ? It's Jordan. That's who it
Yeah.
is.
And we
So
just need
we
one draw,
yes,
I
but with
believe.
this the way we're playing, it's
I
definitely
know.
far from a guarantee. But we'll be back to give you the instant reaction to the roster selection and then the matches as well. But for now, guys, it was great to be back. It was great to be to record a video with PJ, and we'll catch you guys in the next one.